basic factoring when we're using the quadratic formula. So we're going to do both methods, the basic factoring and using quadratic formula here, just so we can see. So you're going to get these kind of parabolas. You will need to do it if it's an inequality or not. You'll still need to find the roots and be able to graph it fully on a graph so that you can see where what the graph will look like, basically. So we're going to take this equation and we're going to factor it, just normal factoring first. So what we're going to do, we're going to look for common factors. In this case, there aren't any. So we're going to do A and C, and we're going to multiply them together. Okay, so 3 times negative 4 gives me negative 12. Then what I want to do is I want to list out the factors of negative 12. So that's going to be 1 times 12, 2 times 6, 3 times 4. We now want to find out which of these pairs is going to add to 4 in the middle. So when I look at it, okay, so we got 2 and 6 are the two that are going to work. I need to make positive 4, which means this needs to be a positive 6 and a negative 2. And let's double check. Negative 2 times positive 6 gives me the negative 12. 6 minus 2 gives me the positive 4, so that works. What we're going to do now is we're going to rewrite this equation, y equals 3x squared. And instead of writing the 4x, I'm going to write it using these. It's going to be minus 2x plus 6x, and then the minus 4 at the end. Basically, this is the same as 4x. We just wrote it a little different. The reason we did that is so we can do factor by grouping. I'm going to group these two together and these two together. So when I look at these two terms, they have in common, it looks like just an x, and that is 3x minus 2. And then when I look at these two terms, what do they have in common? It looks like a 2. So I'm going to say plus 2, and that leaves me with 3x minus 2. Sometimes when you take out this term, you'll find that these two, which should match with this, will be backwards. So it might have been like plus 2 minus 3x, something like that. If you ever get that, just turn this, whatever you factored out, into a negative 2 instead, and it'll work. But for ours, it worked the way we did it, so it's fine. So we got this. Now what we're going to do is we're going to common factor out these two. So it's going to be 3x minus 2. And then in brackets, we get x plus 2. And we have our y equals. So now that we're looking at this, we can see it's pretty clearly in factor form, which tells us what our roots are, which is useful when we're graphing. I can see clearly my roots are going to be negative 2, and it's going to be positive 2 over 3. Which is the 2 over 3. Remember, these are always backwards when you do it. So the roots are really useful so that you can do different things with this question. This was factorable because all of it had nice integer factors. Sometimes you're going to have questions that work a little different and don't factor as nicely. Basically, this part of the question won't yield any real answers. So that's when we got to use our quadratic formula. So I'm going to do the same question, but using quadratic formula instead. So I'm going to write out what it is first. Negative b plus minus square root b squared minus 4ac over 2a. And remember, when we're looking at this, a is the first number, b is the second number, and c is the third number, like the coefficients and the number by itself at the end. Now we're going to sub in our numbers. So we got negative 4 plus minus square root 4 squared, negative 4 squared, minus 4 times 3 times negative 4 divided by 2 times 3. That one was positive. And that is positive too. Sorry, so because it's b, negative b, it was positive 4, which would make it negative 4 because of that, and that was 4. So let's simplify this a little bit. Negative 4 plus minus square root of 16 minus plus is negative times negative. Sorry. Got distracted for a sec. 48 divided by 6. So simplify again. So usually at this point, once I get the square root, whatever is underneath the radical here, to simplified to one number, this is where I'm going to split my answers into the positive and negative. Remember, when you're doing square root, it's basically you're saying you have a parabola. There's always going to be, usually going to be, two answers, two solutions. That's why you get your two answers with the positive negative, because when you square root. So we got negative 4 plus 8 over 6, negative 4 minus 8 over 6. So we'll put these together. We get 4 over 6, which is 2/3. In this alternate answer, we're going to get negative 12 over 6, which is negative 2. And so when we look back, our answers here, our two roots, are the same as these. So, which makes sense because they're really doing the same thing. They're just different methods of doing it. The quadratic formula is nice because it always works. The only time it won't work is if you have a parabola that has no roots, like this, in which case your discriminant, which is here, the stuff under the square root, is going to be negative. And you can just stop and say, oh, I can't do it this way. If that happens and you can't factor it that way and you can't graph it that way, then you got to do vertex form. Okay, which is a different method. So this is an important skill because when we're doing inequalities, we really care about the roots. So being able to find those roots is really useful, and that's how you do it with this skill.